Have you ever met someone who seemed perfect on the surface, yet something deep within you whispered that something wasn't quite right? Someone whose smile never reached their eyes, whose words felt rehearsed, whose very presence left you feeling strangely empty. Carl Jung, the pioneering Swiss psychiatrist who revolutionized our understanding of the human psyche, spent decades studying exactly this phenomenon. What he discovered about people who live fake lives will fundamentally change how you see the world around you, and more importantly, how you see yourself. Jung called it the greatest tragedy of modern existence, the epidemic of people who have become strangers to their own souls. Through his extensive research into the unconscious mind, he uncovered patterns so disturbing, so universally present, that they reveal the hidden crisis plaguing our society. These are not just observations about others, but mirror reflections that might reveal uncomfortable truths about the masks we ourselves wear. In the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you Jung's most profound discoveries about the psychology of fake living. You'll learn to recognize the 7 unmistakable signs that someone has lost touch with their authentic self, understand the psychological mechanisms that drive people to construct elaborate false identities, and most importantly, discover whether you might be living a version of this tragedy yourself. But I must warn you, once you see these patterns, you cannot unsee them. Jung believed that awareness was the first step toward liberation, but it often comes at the cost of comfortable illusions. The first sign Jung identified in people living fake lives is what he called the compulsive performer. These individuals have transformed their entire existence into a carefully choreographed performance, where every gesture, every word, every emotion is calculated for maximum effect on their audience. Picture someone you know who never seems to have an unguarded moment, who speaks in perfectly crafted sentences, even in casual conversation, whose reactions always seem just a fraction too deliberate. Jung discovered that this compulsive performing stems from what he termed persona identification. The persona, in Jungian psychology, is the mask we wear in social situations, the role we play to function in society. It's natural and necessary to have a persona, but tragedy strikes when people become so identified with their mask that they forget there's a real person underneath. They wake up each morning and put on their persona like clothing, but unlike clothing, they never take it off. They eat with it, sleep with it, dream with it. Eventually, they begin to believe that the mask is who they truly are. The psychological consequence of this is devastating. These individuals live in a state of chronic disconnection from their authentic emotions, their genuine desires, their real thoughts. They become actors who have forgotten their acting, playing a role so long that they've lost the script to their original character. Jung observed that such people often experience what he called a peculiar kind of emptiness, a sense that life is happening to someone else, that they're watching their own existence from behind glass. The second sign is even more subtle, yet profoundly revealing: the emotional echo chamber. Jung noticed that people living fake lives rarely express original emotions. Instead, they mirror back what they believe others want to see, like emotional chameleons constantly shifting their inner landscape to match their environment. They laugh when they think they should laugh, feel sad when sadness seems appropriate, express anger when it appears justified. But these emotions are borrowed, second-hand experiences that never quite fit properly. This phenomenon occurs because their authentic emotional life has been buried so deep beneath layers of conditioning and expectation that they've lost access to their genuine feelings. Jung understood that emotions are the language of the soul, our internal compass guiding us toward what truly matters. When someone disconnects from their authentic emotional experience, they become lost navigators sailing without a compass, drifting wherever the currents of others' expectations carry them. These individuals often report feeling like they're going through the motions of life. They might achieve external success, maintain relationships, even appear happy to observers, but internally, They experience what Jung described as a profound alienation from the life force itself. They become strangers to their own hearts, unable to distinguish between what they genuinely want and what they think they should want. The third sign Jung identified is perhaps the most heartbreaking: the perpetual seeking syndrome. These are people who constantly search for themselves in external achievements, relationships, possessions, or experiences, but no matter what they acquire or accomplish, the seeking never ends. They're like travelers who have forgotten their destination, wandering from place to place, relationship to relationship, achievement to achievement, always convinced that the next thing will finally make them feel real. Jung realized that this endless seeking occurs because they're looking for their authentic self in all the wrong places. The true self, what Jung called the self with a capital S, cannot be found in the external world. It exists in the depths of the psyche, in the realm of the unconscious, accessible only through the challenging journey of self-discovery and integration. But people living fake lives have been conditioned to believe that identity comes from outside, that they are what they do, what they own, what others think of them. This creates a tragic cycle. The more they seek externally, the further they drift from their internal truth. The more they achieve, the emptier they feel. The more they acquire, the more they need. Jung observed that such individuals often become addicted to the temporary high of new acquisitions or achievements. But like any addiction, the effects wear off quickly, leaving them craving the next fix. If you've been following along and recognizing some of these patterns, either in yourself or others, I want you to pause for a moment and take a deep breath. What we're exploring here isn't meant to judge or condemn, but to illuminate. Jung believed that consciousness was the greatest gift we could give ourselves and the world. If this content is resonating with you, consider subscribing to continue this journey of psychological exploration. Your willingness to look honestly at these patterns is already a step toward authentic living. The fourth sign Jung discovered is what he called the relationship mirror syndrome. People living fake lives unconsciously surround themselves with others who reflect and reinforce their false identity. They're drawn to relationships that feel safe precisely because they don't challenge the constructed self. These might be superficial friendships based on shared activities rather than genuine connection, romantic relationships where both partners are performing rather than being vulnerable, or professional relationships built entirely on image and achievement. Jung understood that authentic relationships require what he termed psychological nakedness, the willingness to be seen without our masks. But for someone living a fake life, this level of vulnerability feels terrifying because they fear that without their persona, there might be nothing underneath worth loving. So they unconsciously choose relationships that allow them to maintain their performance, surrounding themselves with other performers in an elaborate theater where everyone is acting, but no one admits it. The psychological consequence is profound loneliness. Even when surrounded by people, they feel fundamentally alone because no one knows who they really are, including themselves. They live in what Jung called a gilded cage of their own making, where the very relationships that should nourish their soul instead reinforce their isolation. The fifth sign is particularly insidious: the inner critic's dominion. Jung observed that people living fake lives have internalized a harsh, relentless voice that constantly evaluates, judges, and corrects their every move. This isn't the healthy inner voice of wisdom or conscience, but a tyrannical critic that has appointed itself the director of their performance. This voice tells them how to stand, how to speak, what to feel, what to think, always measuring their performance against impossible standards of perfection. This inner critic is often a composite of all the external voices they've internalized throughout their lives: demanding parents, critical teachers, judgmental peers, societal expectations. Jung realized that this critic becomes so powerful that it essentially hijacks their psyche, making decisions and evaluating choices based not on what would serve their authentic self, but on what would maintain their false identity. Living under this constant internal surveillance creates what Jung described as psychological exhaustion. Every moment requires tremendous energy to maintain the performance, to meet the critic's demands, to ensure that the mask never slips. These individuals often feel tired in ways that sleep cannot cure, depleted by the enormous effort required to live as someone they're not. The sixth sign Jung identified cuts to the very heart of the human experience, the creativity desert. He observed that people living fake lives gradually lose access to their creative expression, not necessarily in the artistic sense, but creativity as the natural outflow of authentic being. True creativity, Jung understood, emerges from the depths of the psyche, from the place where our unique essence meets the world. When someone is disconnected from their authentic self, this wellspring of creativity dries up. Instead of genuine creative expression, they engage in what Jung called imitative production, copying what has been done before, following formulas, reproducing patterns they believe will be acceptable or successful. Their work, their relationships, their very lives become variations on themes rather than original compositions. They become what Jung termed psychological photocopies, producing facsimiles of authentic living rather than creating genuine life experiences. This loss of creativity has profound implications beyond artistic expression. Creativity is the mechanism by which we solve problems uniquely, respond to challenges authentically, and bring our individual gifts to the world. When this capacity is diminished, life becomes mechanical, predictable, and ultimately meaningless. Jung observed that such individuals often report feeling like they're sleepwalking through life, going through familiar motions, but never feeling truly alive. Now we come to the seventh and most profound sign, what Jung considered the ultimate tragedy of fake living, the spiritual void. He discovered that people who live disconnected from their authentic selves inevitably experience what he called a crisis of meaning. No matter how successful their performance, no matter how convincing their mask, there remains a deep, aching emptiness where their connection to something greater should be. Jung understood that authentic spirituality doesn't necessarily require religious belief, but it does require a genuine relationship with what he called the self, the deeper organizing principle of the psyche that connects us to the transcendent. When someone lives primarily from their false persona, they lose access to this deeper dimension of existence. They might go through religious motions, engage in spiritual practices, or seek meaning in various philosophies, but these remain external activities rather than authentic spiritual experiences. This spiritual void manifests as what Jung termed existential drift, a sense that life is happening without purpose, that they're moving through experiences without genuine engagement or meaning. They might achieve everything they thought they wanted and still feel fundamentally empty, successful by external measures, but bankrupt in terms of soul satisfaction. But here's what makes Jung's discoveries so remarkable. He didn't just identify these patterns to diagnose a problem. He spent his life developing a path toward authentic living, a process he called individuation. This is the journey from fake existence to genuine being, from persona identification to self-realization. Jung believed that the crisis of fake living often serves as what he called a sacred breakdown, a necessary destruction of false structures that opens the possibility for authentic reconstruction. The pain of recognizing these patterns in ourselves isn't punishment, it's the birth pangs of genuine selfhood. The discomfort we feel when we see through our own masks isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's evidence that something deeper is trying to emerge. The first step toward authenticity, according to Jung, is what he called shadow work, the courageous process of acknowledging and integrating the parts of ourselves we've rejected or hidden. The shadow contains not only our negative qualities, but also our authentic power, creativity, and vitality. We often suppress these qualities not because they're bad, but because they don't fit the image we're trying to maintain. Consider someone who has built their identity around being nice and agreeable. Their shadow might contain their natural assertiveness, their capacity for healthy anger, their ability to set boundaries. To maintain their false persona of perpetual agreeableness, they've had to disown these vital qualities, but without access to their full range of human emotions and capacities, they become what Jung called half-persons, living only a fraction of their potential. The integration of the shadow isn't about becoming selfish or destructive. It's about reclaiming the energy and authenticity that we've locked away in service of maintaining our false image. When we make peace with our shadow, we no longer need to project our disowned qualities onto others or exhaust ourselves, maintaining impossible standards of perfection. Jung also emphasized the importance of what he called active imagination, a practice of engaging directly with the unconscious through dreams, fantasies, and creative expression. For people living fake lives, the unconscious becomes a repository of all the authentic experiences, emotions, and potentials they've had to suppress. Through active imagination, we can begin to dialogue with these disowned parts of ourselves, learning to hear the voice of our authentic nature beneath the clamor of our conditioned responses. The process of moving from fake to authentic living isn't comfortable or quick. Jung warned that individuation often involves what he called the dark night of the soul, periods of confusion, disorientation, and grief as we let go of familiar but false ways of being. We might find ourselves questioning everything we thought we knew about ourselves, feeling lost as the old maps no longer work, but new ones haven't yet emerged. But Jung also discovered something remarkable. When people commit to this journey of authenticity, they begin to experience what he called a different quality of aliveness. Colors seem more vibrant, relationships become more meaningful, work feels more purposeful, and even difficulties are experienced with greater presence and engagement. They describe feeling like they're finally living their own life, rather than a borrowed existence. The tragedy Jung identified isn't just personal, it's collective. He observed that when large numbers of people live fake lives, entire societies become inauthentic. We create cultures that reward performance over presence, image over integrity, success over satisfaction. We build institutions that demand conformity to false ideals rather than encouraging the development of genuine human potential. But Jung also saw great hope in the growing numbers of people who are awakening to these patterns, who are willing to question the false assumptions of modern life and embark on the journey toward authenticity. He believed that each person who commits to living genuinely creates what he called a ripple effect of authenticity, inspiring others to question their own masks and seek their own truth. The choice Jung presents us with is both simple and profound. We can continue living as actors in a play we didn't write, following scripts that don't reflect our true nature, performing for audiences that may not even be watching. Or we can begin the courageous journey of removing our masks, facing our shadows, and discovering who we really are beneath all the conditioning and expectation. This isn't a one-time decision, but a daily practice, a moment-by-moment choice to respond from our authentic center rather than our conditioned reflexes. It's the decision to feel our real emotions rather than the ones we think we should have, to express our genuine thoughts rather than the ones we believe will be accepted, to pursue what genuinely matters to us rather than what we've been told should matter. Jung reminded us that we are not here to live someone else's life or to fulfill someone else's vision of who we should be. We are here to discover and express our unique essence, to contribute our individual gifts to the world, to live what he called our own unrepeatable story. The fake life, no matter how successful it appears, is ultimately a betrayal of this sacred purpose. As you sit with these revelations, I invite you to ask yourself, what masks have I been wearing? What parts of my authentic self have I hidden away? What would it feel like to live from my genuine center rather than my conditioned responses? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're the questions that lead to liberation. Jung believed that the journey from fake to authentic living was not just personal development, but a spiritual calling, a responsibility we have not only to ourselves, but to the world. Every person who chooses authenticity over performance, who commits to being real rather than perfect, who has the courage to live their truth rather than others' expectations, contributes to what he called the healing of the collective psyche. The path forward isn't about becoming perfect or eliminating all traces of our social conditioning. It's about developing what Jung called conscious relationship with our persona, wearing our social masks when appropriate, but never forgetting that they are masks. It's about integrating our shadow, embracing our complexity, and learning to live from the deeper place Jung called the self. Your willingness to engage with these ideas, to question the patterns of fake living in yourself and others, is already a sign that your authentic self is stirring, ready to emerge from whatever false structures have contained it. The journey toward genuine living is not easy, but Jung promised that it is the only path to what he called real satisfaction, the deep fulfillment that comes from aligning our outer life with our inner truth. Remember, you are not here to be a perfect copy of anyone else's ideal. You are here to be the fullest, most authentic expression of who you really are. That person, your real self, is waiting to be discovered, waiting to be lived, waiting to contribute their unique gifts to this world that desperately needs more authentic human beings. The question Jung leaves us with is not whether we will face the choice between fake and authentic living, but when, and whether we will have the courage to choose truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, genuine being over perfect performance. The invitation is always there, waiting for us to accept it, waiting for us to come home to ourselves.